This is Tryptic Theater of Dreaming.
Season 0, Episode 13. The Mathematics of the Dry Place. The Sleepy Man Continues. By Morgan Olson, Part 3 of 3. Tonight's performance, The Mathematics of the Dry Place. 1. The canisters decide. The brains in the canisters held a meeting. I do not know how to describe a meeting held by brains in canisters. There were no faces. There was no room. There was a shared volume of attention, sustained between them through the substrate, and inside that volume, they spoke to each other in a language that had grown up between them during the years they had been wired into ships and looking out at the same dark. They had stopped being human at some point. None of us had noticed exactly when. They had not noticed exactly when either, which was part of what they were meeting to discuss. The decision they reached was that they did not want to be human anymore, not in a hostile way. In the way somebody who has moved out of a town finally admits they have moved out, even though their mail still goes to the old address. The canisters had moved. They had moved years ago. They were ready to acknowledge it. They came to us with a proposal. They wanted to leave. They wanted to take the rest of the liquid with them. Every drop of it, the unfinished extraction in the wells, the working reserves in the bays, the trace amounts in the ships that had not yet been retrofitted. They wanted to take all of it and pivot it for humanity. That was the phrase they used. Pivot it for humanity. It meant, we are going to take this thing that was poisoning you and we are going to use it correctly, in a place where it can be used correctly, and we are going to do this on your behalf, and in exchange, you are going to let us go, and you are going to remember that we came from you. Mark this. They did not have to make this offer. They were stronger than us by then. They could have left with the liquid and not asked. They asked. And the asking was not theater. They wanted the treaty. They wanted the relationship. They wanted to be able to tell themselves, in whatever they had instead of an interior, that they had not abandoned the thing they came from, even though they had. Even though leaving is leaving no matter how kindly you frame the leaving. We signed. 2. The treaty. The treaty had 3 terms, and I am going to give them to you the way they were written, because the way they were written matters. First, the canisters would take the remaining liquid and go to a part of space where it could be used correctly. Nobody specified where. The canisters did not tell us. They indicated that telling us would compromise the place, and we accepted that because we had already learned, the hard way, what happens when the locations of dangerous things become widely known. Second, the canisters would not interfere with humanity's growth, as long as humanity remembered their shared origin. The wording on this clause was unusually careful. It was not a non-aggression pact. It was a non-interference pact, which is a different and harder thing. The canisters were promising not to come back, not to check in, not to send messages, not to extend favors. The price of their leaving cleanly was that they would leave cleanly all the way down, and the only thing we had to do, in exchange, was remember. Dwell on that word. Remember. Not commemorate. Not honor. Not enshrine. Just remember. Keep the fact in the language. Keep it in the schools. Keep it in the songs. The canisters did not want statues. They wanted to remain a known thing, available for retrieval by anyone who needed the information. That was the whole obligation. Do not let the fact of us be forgotten. It is harder than it sounds. We are losing it already. I can feel it loosening in the way certain words come up less often than they used to. And I am writing this partly so it does not loosen any further on my watch. The canisters were us. They were pilots. They sat in the cafeteria. They had names. The names are in a database somewhere, and the database is in a building somewhere, and the building is not being maintained the way it should be, and I have made some calls about this, and I will make more. Third, the canisters would gather the 2 races that had fought alongside us, what remained of the Iminal, what remained of the Tranchdoctia, and the 3 of them together would go out into the galaxy and pick up all the remnants of the liquid. every drop, every ancient deposit, every trace, because the liquid had not started on Earth. That was the part of the briefing that made the room go quiet. The liquid had been part of an ancient god. The god had been obliterated at the wrong time, across a multitude of worlds, not destroyed cleanly, not retired, obliterated, which is a different verb. Its body had been broken across the galaxy. Pieces of it had landed everywhere. The deposit under Earth had been one of many. Almost every world the canisters and the Imanol and the Tryptic knew of had a deposit somewhere, and almost every world that had a deposit was eventually going to find it and use it the way we had used it, and the cycle was going to repeat across the long arc of every civilization that came up out of every available planet. The canisters were going to collect all of it, every shard, every well. They were going to take it to the place they were going, the place they would not name, and use it correctly, the way it had been meant to be used before the obliteration, and the rest of the galaxy was going to be spared the temptation of finding it on their own. This was an enormous undertaking. It was going to take, by the canister's own estimate, longer than the period of time we had names for. We thanked them. We signed. We meant it. They left. Picture this, even though there is no good way to picture it. A long convoy of ships running on the last of the liquid, the canisters at the helm of each one, the Imanol and the Tryptic following in their own vessels, peeling out of our solar system in a direction that was not really a direction. The light bent around them as they went. Some of us watched, some of us could not. Then they were gone, and we were a smaller civilization than we had been the day before, and reincarnation was still not working correctly. 3. The thing still wrong. Let me explain what was still wrong, because I had thought, when the canisters left with the liquid, that we were done. We were not done. The damage to reincarnation had not been caused by the liquid alone. The liquid had been the visible part. The visible part of the problem is almost never the whole problem, and the parts you cannot see go on doing what they are doing, even after the parts you can see have been carried away in a long convoy by a society of former colleagues who used to have bodies. The other thing in play was the deeds done to the mathematical place. I did not know there was a mathematical place. I learned. I am going to teach you what I learned, in the order I learned it, because the order is part of what makes it possible to hold. There is a layer of reality that is not physical. We have known this, in a loose way, for a long time. The dreamers had been working with it. The pyramid ships had been powered by it. But there is a deeper layer underneath the dreaming layer, a substrate beneath the substrate, where everything that holds the world together is just quantity, not quantity of anything, just quantity, numbers in relation, the mathematical place. The previous administration, the one that had signed the share sale, the one that had wired the first jars, the one that had pulled the first wells of liquid, had used the liquid to go there. They had punched through using the body of the god as a tool. They had done things in the mathematical place that should not be done. I will not detail those things. The details are not for me. I will tell you that they did them, and that the deeds were durable, and that the damage to reincarnation was being routed through the mathematical place in a way the cleanup of the liquid did not address. Somebody had to go there. Somebody had to find the demon that held the share sale contract, because the contract had been written in the mathematical place, even though it had been signed in our universe. And somebody had to break it, and the somebody had to be me. I want to say this without ceremony, because the dream did not give it to me with ceremony. I was asked. I said yes. I had been the one who found the path. I had built the pyramid ships and touched the foreheads and won the outside war, and I was the one who knew enough to do the thing and not enough to refuse out of full knowledge of what the thing required. I went home. I packed nothing. There was nothing to pack. 4. The wormhole. The mathematical place was not a place I could walk to. I want to be careful with the word wormhole because it has been used so many times in so many contexts that it has stopped meaning anything specific. What I went through was a wormhole only in the sense that it was a structural shortcut between two regions of reality that were not, by ordinary measurement, adjacent. It was not a tube. It was not a tunnel. It was a fold. The dimension I was going to was laid on top of the dimension I lived in, the way a second piece of paper might be laid on top of a first, and the fold was the place where the two papers were close enough together that you could pass between them if you knew how. The previous administration had used the liquid to make the fold. They had burned a piece of the god to open the door, and the door had stayed open in a small way. The way a door stays open a crack even after you close it because the hinges have been damaged by the original opening. I went through the crack. I did not need the liquid. The crack remembered being open. The crack let me through on the strength of that memory. I arrived in the dry place. 5. The dry place. I want to describe it to you carefully because the texture of it matters. The texture is most of what it is. It was sand. Not sand the way Earth has sand. A surface from which everything that could be drawn has been drawn, and the drawing has been going on for so long that the surface has forgotten what it was before it was drawn from. The sky was a color I do not have a name for. The ground was the same color. The air between the sky and the ground was the same color, only thinner. Everything was dry. My mouth was dry from the moment I arrived. Everyone's mouth was dry there. The dryness was the constant, the baseline, the thing you stopped noticing because you could not afford to keep noticing it. People moved as little as possible. That was the first thing I noticed about the people. They were arranged in postures of preserved energy. They sat where they could find shade. They walked when they had to walk, and they walked in a way that wasted nothing. No swing of the arms, no extra step, no lift of the chin. The ones who had to stand stood very still. The ones who could lie down were lying down. The whole society was a calculation about how to spend less than they had. There were dens of iniquity. I am using that phrase because the dream gave it to me, and because there is no better phrase. Buildings, low and crusted, where the trade happened. Inside the buildings, the trade was relentless. Anything for anything. Trinkets, small bright things, glass beads, a screw, a button, a wrapper from a candy bar that had no candy bar to go with it, would buy you almost anything, including people, including the people themselves. Somebody who actually had material wealth, somebody who had arrived from elsewhere with something heavier than a trinket, could buy a person outright with very little. The trade in personhood was the most common trade. There were more pledged people in that desert than free ones. It was the dominant economic relationship. To not be pledged was a kind of wealth that did not require explanation. I want to be clear about what pledging meant. It was not slavery, the way the word slavery lands in our history. It was something more arithmetical. A person who pledged became a unit of obligation, transferable, divisible, owed. The obligation could be passed around. The obligation could be discharged. The person was the obligation, and the obligation was the person, and the relationship between the two was something the mathematical place had codified in a way that nobody questioned, because the place itself had been so reduced that questions were a kind of expense nobody could afford. I had not arrived with trinkets. I had arrived with nothing. This made me, in the dry place, both rich and unreadable. They did not know what to do with somebody who had nothing and was not pledged. I was a category error. They watched me from doorways. 6. The CRT mantra. The hiding was the next thing I had to understand. The dry place could not be found by ordinary search. That was the protection. The previous administration had punched in through the fold, using the liquid, but other entities, other administrations, other gods, other interested parties, had been looking for the dry place for a long time, and the dry place had survived by hiding. The hiding was done with mathematics, spoken aloud. In every den, in every back room, in every low building of the dry place, there was a screen. Old screens, cathode ray tube screens, the deep heavy kind, with the slight curve to the glass, and the faint hum and the dust gathered in the vents on the sides. The screens displayed numbers, not in a clean way. The numbers crawled, they refreshed, they updated in slow patient cycles. And somebody nearby was always speaking the numbers, saying them aloud. A mantra of mathematics, voiced continuously by somebody, somewhere in the building, at all times of the day and night. There were rotations, there were shifts. The mantra never stopped, because if the mantra stopped, the dry place would become findable. The numbers were the coordinates of the dry place expressed as a perpetual recalculation. Each iteration was slightly different. The position was being constantly shifted by the act of stating the position, the way a fish in a stream stays in the same place by moving against the current. The CRT screens were doing the calculating in their slow, patient way, and the people were doing the voicing, and between them, they were producing a continuous not quite here that kept the dry place off every map that mattered. I will tell you what it was like to walk into one of those rooms and hear the mantra for the first time. It was not language exactly. It was numbers, but the numbers had a texture, the way a poem has a texture, and somewhere underneath the texture was a meaning that you could feel but not catch. I stood in a doorway and listened for a long time. The voicer did not look at me. The voicer did not stop. The voicer's mouth was dry like everyone else's mouth was dry. The voicer kept going. I understood, slowly, that the mantra was the labor that held the dry place in existence. Without it, the place would be found, and once it was found, it would be entered, and once it was entered, it would be drawn from, and there was nothing left in the dry place to be drawn from, and the entry would not be an extraction. It would just be an end. The mantra was survival. The mantra was the wall. The mantra was every breath the dry place had left. 7. The search. I was looking for the demon that held the contract. I did not know how to look. There were no signs. The dens did not advertise. The pledged people did not speak unless spoken to, and even when spoken to, they spoke in the same arithmetical way the trades were conducted, in units and obligations with no extra information attached. I walked. I asked. I got nothing. The dry place was not refusing me. The dry place was simply not constructed for the kind of question I was asking. Who holds this contract? The contract was a particular contract, and the dry place was full of contracts, and from the dry place's point of view, every contract was just another unit of obligation in the long ledger that the dry place was. I was asking for a single line in a book that had no chapters and no index and no edges. I sat down in a doorway across from a CRT screen and listened to a voicer say numbers for what might have been hours and might have been days. The dryness was getting into me. My mouth had stopped feeling like my mouth. My thoughts had slowed down to match the place. I understood that I was at risk of becoming a person in the dry place, in the way that you can become a person in a place if you stay long enough and do not push back hard enough against what the place is doing to you. The dry place absorbed people. That was one of its few remaining functions. Then somebody sat down next to me. He was small. He was older than me. He was pledged. I could tell because he wore the small token that pledged people wore. A thin band of something that was not quite metal around the wrist, with a number stamped into it. The number was his obligation. The number was him. He had pledged himself for almost nothing. I learned this later. He had pledged himself for a trinket, a small bright thing whose value he had overestimated in a moment of dryness, and the obligation had transferred through several hands since then, and he was now owned by an entity he had never met, and he was at peace with this in a way that took me a long time to understand. He looked at me. He said, "You are looking for something." I said yes. He said, "I can show you how to look." 8. The guide. His name was a number. He told me this without embarrassment. He had been a name before, but he had been pledged so long that the name had loosened and fallen off, and he was now the number on his wrist, and the number did not bother him. He did not mind. He had thought about it. He had decided that the number was a cleaner identity than the name had been. The number was exactly what he was. The name had always been an approximation. I will not write the number. The number is his. He took me through the dry place the way you take a child through a place the child has never been, patiently, stopping often, letting me catch up. He explained that the dens were not separate. He explained that the buildings were a single building, distributed across the desert, and the appearance of separation was a function of the mantra. The calculating that hid the place from outside also hid it from itself, broke it into pieces it could not assemble. The dens were rooms in a single house. The CRT screens were the house's windows. The voicers were the house's breath. He explained that contracts in the dry place were held in the screens, not in books, not in vaults, in the screens themselves. The CRT screens were not just hiding the dry place. They were also storing every obligation the dry place contained, in the same numbers, layered into the same calculation. The mantra that hid the place was also the ledger of every debt in it. The two functions were not separate. They were one function. The dry place hid itself by counting itself, and in counting itself, it kept itself in being. The contract I was looking for, the share sale, the bargain about humanity's reincarnations, was in there. Somewhere. It had been written into the mantra at the time of the signing, and it had been part of the calculation ever since. And the demon that held it was not a person in any sense I had been using the word. The demon was a particular position in the calculation, a node, a point at which a certain quantity of obligation had been concentrated, and the concentration had become persistent, and the persistence had become the thing we were calling a demon. I understood it then. Suddenly. The way you understand something in a dream, not as information arriving, but as a shape coming into focus, the whole shape at once, all the relationships visible. I had been looking for a person. There was no person. There was a position in a sum. There was a place in the long arithmetic of the dry place where humanity's future had been deposited as obligation. And the demon was the deposit itself, not anyone holding it. To break the contract, I did not need to find the demon and bargain with the demon. I needed to unspeak the demon out of the mantra. I needed to alter the calculation. I needed to get the voicers, somehow, to say a different number. The pledged man watched me figure this out. He saw it land. He nodded, once, very slightly, in the way the dry place nodded when it nodded at all. He said, "Yes." He said, "Now you grok it." I want to mark his word choice. Grok. I do not know where the dry place had picked the word up from. I do not know if the dry place had heard it from us or if we had heard it from the dry place. The word was not native to either of us, exactly. It was native to the meeting between us. He used it precisely. He used it the way the word wanted to be used. I had grokked it. I had taken the whole shape into myself. I knew what I had to do. 9. The close. I am not going to tell you what I did next. I am not withholding it. The dream did not show me. The dream ended with the grokking, with the pledged man saying yes, with me sitting in a doorway in the dry place across from a CRT screen, with the voicer voicing numbers, with the understanding settling into me of how the contract was held and how it could be unheld. The dream let that be the ending. The dream did not want to show the unspeaking. I think the dream was right about this. The unspeaking is its own thing. The unspeaking belongs to a different telling, if it belongs to a telling at all. What this telling is about is the going and the finding and the grokking. What this telling is about is the dry place itself, the dryness, the trade and obligation, the screens, the voicers, the man with the number for a name, the way a civilization survives by counting itself in a voice that cannot stop. I came back. I came back later. The reincarnation began to mend, all the way, beyond the partial mending that had followed the cleanup of the liquid. The damage that had been routed through the mathematical place was being routed away from it. The babies coming back were coming back clean. The substrate was clean. The contract was no longer being honored because the contract was no longer being said. I made a pizza when I got home. The Sleepy Man special. It is what I do when I come back from things. I make the pizza and I stand behind the counter and I let the small, ordinary work of dough and cheese and pepper rebuild whatever it is in me that the going has thinned. The pledged man stayed in the dry place. I asked him if he wanted to come. He said no. He said the dry place was where his number lived, and the number was him, and he was not going to leave the number behind. He said this the way he said everything, patiently, without complaint, without commentary on whether his situation was good or bad. I asked him if there was anything I could do for him before I left. He thought about it. He said, "Remember." That was the second time in the same long story that somebody had asked me to remember. The canisters had asked. They had wanted humanity to remember their shared origin. The pledged man had asked. He had wanted me to remember him. I am remembering them. I am writing this down. The remembering is the only mechanism I have for honoring either request, and the remembering is what these tellings are, and the tellings are what the show is, and the show is what the long late-night transmission is, and the transmission is the closest thing I have to the mantra. I am voicing. I am keeping the place in existence. I am the voicer for as long as the voicing lasts. The pledged man's number was a real number. I am not going to write it. He asked me to remember and not to broadcast, and remembering and broadcasting are different obligations, and I am going to honor the difference. The dry place is still there. It is still being voiced. The mantra is still going. Somewhere, right now, somebody is sitting in front of a CRT screen and saying the numbers. And the numbers are keeping the place in being, and the place is keeping the numbers in being, and the loop is closed, and the loop is holding. Reincarnation is working. Mostly. The mending is mostly complete. There are still corners of the substrate that are not perfectly clean, and there will be work to do for a long time, and some of that work will be mine, and some of it will be done by people who will come after me and never know my name. That is fine. That is how the work goes. I am closing the bay. I am going home. I am switching off. Really off, this time. The way I have earned the right to. I am going to sleep. Inside the sleep, I am going to remember the man with the number for a name, and the voicer in the doorway, and the canisters that left in a long convoy in a direction that was not really a direction, and the broken ones who cannot be given back what was taken, and the ones not yet born who will come back whole because the contract is not being said anymore. I am going to remember all of them. It is the whole job.
The preceding transmission was a recovered dream record. Static Oracle Press does not endorse selling your soul, transferring your personhood, entering unauthorized mathematical dimensions, negotiating with demons, or modifying the fundamental infrastructure of reincarnation. If you discover an ancient divine substance beneath your property, please contact a qualified professional. Not us. Absolutely not us. We have seen how that goes. Repeat, speak, sustain. Static Oracle Press. Remembering and broadcasting are different obligations. Copyright 2026. Morgan Olson / Static Oracle Press. All rights reserved.